Dr. Amanda Brooks hadn't slept in 36 hours, but the readings on her monitor demanded attention. The Kuiper Belt Observatory's deep space array was picking up something she'd never seen before, thousands of quantum wake signatures, all converging toward the outer solar system. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago in the dim light of her cramped observation pod, one of dozens attached to the orbital station like barnacles on a spacefaring whale. "Computer, run diagnostic series theta through the QWD sensors," she commanded, her voice hoarse from too many hours of silence. The computer chirped in acknowledgement, but before it could complete its task, a new alert flashed across her screen. The quantum disturbances were intensifying. "Holy shit," she whispered, watching as the first visual confirmation came through. The long-range cameras caught it. A massive ship, its hull scared and burning, tumbling out of what looked like a tear in space itself. Then another, and another. Within minutes, her displays were tracking hundreds of vessels, each emerging from FTL in a cascade of broken ships and broken physics. Amanda's hands flew across her haptic interface, sending emergency signals to both Earth Defense Command and her research team. The response was immediate and skeptical. "Brooks, are you sure this isn't another false positive?" Director Matthews' voice crackled through her comm. "We've had enough wild goose chases with deep space phenomena this quarter. Sir, with all due respect, I'm looking at over 300 confirmed ships of unknown origin," Amanda replied, her tone sharp with urgency. "And they're not just passing through. They're decelerating. These are controlled entries, despite the damage to their vessels." She pushed more data to Earth Defense Command, watching as the numbers kept climbing. 400 ships, 500. The space around the Kuiper Belt was becoming a graveyard of limping vessels, each one carrying who knew how many souls. Then she saw it. One of the smaller ships, barely larger than a terrestrial corvette, was drifting closer to her station. Its hull was riddled with damage that didn't match any known weapons signature in the human database. As she watched, emergency lighting flickered through its viewports in a distinct pattern. "They're signaling," she breathed. Without waiting for authorization, she began broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Dr. Amanda Brooks of the Kuiper Belt Observatory. We receive you. Please respond." The answer came not in words, but in data. Her systems were suddenly flooded with transmissions, technical specifications, spatial coordinates, and what looked like damage reports. But buried within the stream of information was something else. Footage. Amanda's blood ran cold as she watched the recordings. Massive geometric shapes, beautiful in their terrible perfection, descended upon worlds that looked nothing like Earth. The ships, she realized, would unleash swarms of smaller objects that broke down everything they touched, converting matter into complex computational structures. But it was the screams that would haunt her. Even through the alien frequencies, the terror was universal. "Director," she called, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "I'm sending you something. We need to convene the Defense Council. Now." "What exactly am I looking at, Brooks?" "The end of worlds, sir. These aren't invaders. They're refugees." She paused, watching as more ships appeared, their hulls bearing the scars of battles they hadn't won. "They're running from something that's consuming entire civilizations, converting them into some kind of computational matrix. The refugees are calling them the Devourers." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of history shifting on its axis. Humanity had just become part of a much larger, much more terrifying universe. "Sir," Amanda added, her scientific detachment warring with her humanity, "these ships are failing. Their life support systems are critical. We need to make a decision fast, or we're going to witness a genocide in our own backyard." The director's response was lost in a new alarm. One of the refugee ships had just gone dark, its systems finally giving out. Amanda watched its lights flicker and die, knowing that somewhere in that metal coffin, alien children might be taking their last breaths. Humanity's moment of choice had arrived sooner than anyone had expected. Colonel Jack Harrison stood before the United Earth Defense Council, his weathered hands pressed against the holographic display. The massive chamber, normally filled with the quiet murmur of diplomatic discussions, was dead silent as he manipulated the projection of the asteroid belt. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 25 years of military service, "we're thinking about this all wrong. Traditional defensive platforms won't cut it against an enemy that can convert entire worlds into computational matter." A counselor from the European Union leaned forward. "Then what exactly are you proposing, Colonel?" Harrison's fingers danced across the display, and the asteroid belt began to shift, individual rocks lighting up in complex patterns. "We turn the entire belt into one massive defense system. Not just weapons platforms, but a true defensive wall with depth, redundancy, and most importantly, unpredictability." "Impossible," the Chinese representative scoffed. "The resources required are already there." A new voice cut in. Dr. Rebecca Martinez strode into the chamber, her lab coat wrinkled from too many hours in her AI research facility. She hadn't been invited to this meeting, but Harrison had learned long ago that the brilliant scientist rarely waited for permission. "The asteroids themselves are the resources," Martinez continued, pulling up her own data streams. "We've been developing quantum-enabled fabrication systems, self-replicating machines that can convert raw mineral mass into defensive platforms. But here's the key. They won't all be identical." Harrison nodded, building on her point. "Every section of the wall will be unique, unpredictable. The Devourers excel at analyzing patterns and adapting, so we give them no patterns to analyze." The chamber erupted in overlapping voices until Council President Chen raised her hand for silence. "Dr. Martinez, you're talking about AI-controlled weapons platforms. After what we've seen of these Devourers, how can you suggest?" "Not I," Martinez interrupted, her eyes blazing with intensity. "These will be hybrid systems, human operators linked to adaptive defense networks that operate on principles of controlled chaos. The machines don't think. They react based on human input and quantum randomization protocols. Unpredictable, but always under human control." Harrison manipulated the display again, showing simulated attacks against the proposed wall. "Look at these projections. Traditional defenses fail because they're too predictable. But this..." He gestured at a sequence where defensive platforms moved in seemingly random patterns, creating overlapping fields of fire. "This can't be predicted because even we won't know exactly how it will react. You're asking us to bet humanity's survival on controlled chaos." The Russian representative's voice dripped with skepticism. "No," Harrison replied, his voice firm. "I'm asking you to bet on human unpredictability. It's our greatest strength. Every other species we've encountered through the refugees developed their technology along logical, predictable paths. We didn't. We took weird shortcuts, made intuitive leaps, developed redundant systems just because we could." Martinez stepped closer to the display, her fingers tracing the patterns of asteroid movements. "We've already tested a prototype system in the Kuiper Belt. Small scale, just 3 linked platforms. When we ran simulated attacks against it using standard tactical AI, the results were beyond anything we expected." She pulled up the test footage. The council watched in silence as 3 defensive platforms, moving in seemingly random patterns, destroyed an attacking force 4 times their size. The platforms never established a fixed pattern, never became predictable enough for the tactical AI to develop an effective counter-strategy. "The Devourers are coming," Harrison said into the silence that followed. "We can either hide and hope they pass us by, or we can build something they've never seen before, something that goes against every logical principle they operate on." President Chen studied the simulation for a long moment. "How long?" 6 months to establish the first defensive line. A year to complete the full wall." Martinez's voice was confident. "We already have the fabrication technology. We just need authorization to begin full-scale deployment." Harrison watched the council members exchange glances. They'd all seen the refugee footage, all knew what failure would mean. Humanity's time as a minor species, hidden away in an unfashionable spiral arm, was over. Now they had to prove they deserved their place among the stars. "Do it," Chen said finally, "but God help us if we're wrong." Harrison met Martinez's eyes across the chamber. They weren't wrong, but they were about to rewrite every rule of space warfare, if they survived long enough to finish their wall. Marine Corps' combat engineer Kelly Thompson stood in the massive underground chamber of Bunker 7, watching her daughter Sarah play tag with a young Zixi. The alien child moved with surprising grace despite having 6 legs, its iridescent exoskeleton catching the light as it scuttled after the laughing human girl. "They adapt faster than we do," said Crickstall, the Zixi's parent guardian, mandibles clicking in what Kelly had learned was their version of amusement. 3 cycles ago, she could barely move in Earth gravity. Kelly nodded, checking the atmospheric readings on her tablet. The bunker's environment was a careful balance. Earth normal in the central chambers, but with specialized habitat zones branching off like spokes of a wheel. Each zone was precisely calibrated for different species' needs: high-pressure chambers for the crystalline Veth, methane-rich environments for the gaseous Nur, even reverse gravity sections for the arachnid-like Kalex. Chief Thompson, a young engineer, came running up, his face pale. "We got a problem in Chamber 12. The Merrick ship's life support is failing faster than expected. We got 40 minutes before their atmosphere goes toxic." Kelly was already moving. "Get me a suit and tell Dr. Evans to meet me there." She turned to Crickstall. "Could you watch Sarah for a bit longer?" The Zixi's secondary arms made a gesture of acceptance. Of course, children should play while the adults worry. The emergency suit sealed around Kelly as she jogged through the connecting tunnels. Chamber 12 was their newest conversion, a former nuclear waste storage facility now being transformed into a habitat for the ammonia-breathing Merrick. The ship carrying their refugees had taken heavy damage fleeing the Devourers, and its life support was degrading faster than predicted. "Talk to me," Kelly called out as she entered the chamber's control room. Dr. Evans, their xenobiologist, was already there, his fingers flying over the environmental controls. "The ammonia-nitrogen mix isn't stabilizing," he said without looking up. "We're getting weird reactions with the chamber's old cooling system. If we can't get it right, we'll have nowhere to put them when their ship fails." Kelly studied the readouts, her mind racing. The Merrick needed specific atmospheric conditions to survive. Pressure at 2.3 Earth normal, temperature at -33 Celsius, and a precise mix of ammonia and nitrogen. The chamber's old cooling system, designed for nuclear waste storage, was fighting their modifications. "What if we don't fight it?" she muttered, an idea forming. "The cooling system wants to make things cold. So let it." Her fingers flew across the controls, redirecting the ancient cooling systems to work with their modifications instead of against them. "That's insane," Evans protested. "The temperature fluctuations will create exactly the convection currents the Merrick need," Kelly finished. "Their natural environment isn't stable, it's dynamic. We've been trying to create something too perfect." She worked quickly, using the building's old systems in ways their original engineers never imagined. The temperature began to drop, and with it, the atmospheric mix started to stabilize. When she added carefully timed pulses from the ventilation system, the entire chamber came alive with swirling currents of ammonia-rich air. "My God," Evans breathed, watching the readings stabilize. "It's working." Kelly was already calling the Merrick ship. "Captain Relith, chamber is ready for evacuation. Bringing you in through airlock 3. The next 30 minutes were organized chaos as they evacuated the Merrick refugees. Kelly stood at the observation window, watching as the tall, crystalline beings entered their new home. Their bodies, evolved for life in ammonia storms, rippled with color as they felt the artificial currents she created. Captain Raylith approached the window, its crystalline form refracting the light into rainbow patterns. Through the translator, its voice carried both relief and wonder. "You've given us a piece of home. We did not expect such understanding from Oxygen Brothers." Kelly thought of her daughter playing with the Zixi child, of how quickly both had adapted to their differences. "That's the thing about Earth, Captain. We're good at making room for everyone." She felt her tablet buzz. Another refugee ship was approaching, another species needing shelter. As she headed out to face the next challenge, Kelly smiled. The Devourers might be able to convert worlds into computers, but they'd never understand what she'd learned today. True strength wasn't in perfect systems, but in the beautiful chaos of different beings learning to live together. Mike Davidson hadn't left his workspace in the converted shipping container for 3 days. The walls were covered in holographic displays showing attack patterns, technical readouts, and fragments of alien code. Empty coffee cups and energy drink cans littered his desk, testament to his obsession with the puzzle before him. "There's a pattern here," he muttered, his former NSA training kicking in as he traced the Devourers' attack sequences across multiple star systems. "They're not just destroying, they're shopping." Shopping. The crystalline form of Dr. Vextra, a quantum physicist from the Andromeda Arm, shifted colors in what Mike had learned was confusion. The Devourers are a machine intelligence focused on assimilation and destruction. Mike shook his head, pulling up new data streams. "Look at the attack sequence on your homeworld versus the Zixi colonies. Different approaches, different priorities. They didn't just overwhelm defenses. They specifically targeted certain technologies first." He manipulated the holographic display, overlaying attack patterns from a dozen different systems. See, when they hit worlds with quantum-based tech, they focused on research centers first. But with civilizations using dark matter manipulation, they prioritized power generation facilities. Vextra's crystalline structure pulsed with sudden understanding. They're collecting, adding new technological capabilities to their own. Exactly. Mike's fingers danced across his interface, pulling up Earth's technological development timeline. But look at this. Human tech evolution is completely different from galactic standard. We developed in weird jumps and starts, often solving problems in ways that made no sense to anyone else. A warning klaxon cut through their discussion. A refugee ship had just dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system, and behind it, a Devourer scout vessel was in pursuit. "Show me their approach vector," Mike demanded, his hands flying across the controls. The tactical display showed the refugee ship, a Zixi science vessel, trying to reach the Guardian Wall's protection. The Devourer scout was gaining rapidly. "They'll never make it." Vextra's colors shifted to deep worry purple. "The scout's weapons will be in range in 3 minutes." Mike was already accessing the Guardian Wall's outer defensive grid. "Maybe not, but we can buy them time." He pulled up the ship's specs. The Zixi use quantum-based engines, right? Standard galactic configuration. "Yes, but..." "Perfect." Mike's fingers blurred across his controls. "Because we humans, we never cracked quantum propulsion, went a completely different direction. Our ECN systems were designed to mess with much simpler tech." He activated a series of defensive platforms, not to attack, but to broadcast wide-spectrum electromagnetic interference based on old human military protocols. The effect was immediate. The Devourer scout's approach faltered as its quantum sensors encountered patterns they weren't designed to handle. "Their systems are too advanced," Mike explained, grinning. "They're looking for complex quantum interference patterns, not this primitive EM soup we're throwing at them. It's like trying to read Shakespeare while someone shines a flashlight in your eyes. The simple thing ruins the complex thing." The refugee ship was pulling ahead now, but the scout was adapting. Mike watched the Devourer vessel's emissions changing as it attempted to compensate for the interference. "They're learning," he muttered, "but learning takes time." He altered the interference pattern, switching to an even older electronic warfare protocol from the 21st century. The scout's systems stuttered again, confused by the change from complex to simple disruption. "Impossible," Vextra pulsed. They're using technology centuries ahead of yours. How can your primitive systems affect them? Mike grinned as the refugee ship finally reached the Guardian Wall's protection zone. Sometimes the old ways work best. The Devourers understand advanced quantum mechanics, but they've never had to deal with someone throwing simple electronic sand in their eyes. The scout vessel, finally giving up its pursuit, turned and vanished back into FTL. Mike leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. We've been thinking about this all wrong. The Devourers' strength is their ability to absorb and understand advanced technology. But human tech, it evolved in such a weird patchwork way that half our solutions don't make any sense. He looked at the attack pattern analysis still floating in the air. We don't need to be more advanced than them. We just need to be different enough that their learning algorithms can't predict what we'll do next. Vextra's colors shifted to deep thought blue. Perhaps that is why they have not yet directly attacked Earth. You are an anomaly they cannot easily solve. Yeah, Mike said, reaching for another energy drink. Now we just need to figure out how to use that advantage before they decide to brute force the problem and throw everything they have at us. The warning klaxon sounded again. Another refugee ship was arriving, and behind it, more Devourer scouts. The night was far from over. Commander Lisa Reeves watched from the Guardian Wall's Central Command as the Devourer probe fleet emerged from FTL. 30 ships strong, their geometric forms beautiful and terrifying against the backdrop of stars. Her best friend and second in command, Maya Chen, stood beside her, both of them reflected in the massive observation window. Battle stations, Lisa ordered, her voice calm despite the gravity of the moment. All sectors initiate randomization protocols. Let's show them what chaos theory looks like in practice. The Guardian Wall came alive. Thousands of asteroids, converted into defense platforms, began moving in seemingly erratic patterns. Some platforms split apart, others combined. Solar mirrors redirected energy in unpredictable bursts, while quantum sensors created a web of ever-shifting detection fields. They're prodding Sector 7, Maya reported, her hands dancing across the tactical display. Standard attack pattern. Wait. They're adapting already. The lead ships are changing formation. Lisa smiled grimly. Good. Initiate Protocol Thunderbird. The nearest defense platforms suddenly went dark, appearing to malfunction. It was an old trick, playing dead to draw in the enemy. The Devourers, their logic circuits calculating risk and opportunity, took the bait. They're advancing into the kill zone, Maya confirmed. But Ma'am, their energy signatures are changing. They're learning faster than simulations predicted. Then we'll just have to learn faster. Lisa opened a channel to all human operators. Listen up. From this point on, ignore all tactical protocols. Trust your gut. Do the unexpected. Every one of you has full autonomy to engage as you see fit. Maya shot her a worried look. Lisa, that's against every regulation in the book. The book was written for fighting predictable enemies. Lisa countered. Our strength isn't in our technology. It's in our creativity. Our ability to make choices that don't make sense. The battle erupted in earnest. Devourer ships, their hulls gleaming with impossible geometries, unleashed waves of attack drones. But instead of facing organized resistance, they encountered chaos. Each section of the wall fought differently. Some platforms used old-fashioned ballistic weapons, others deployed experimental quantum disruptors. Some simply rammed the enemy vessels at relativistic speeds. Section 3 is breached, Maya reported tensely. They're adapting to our randomization patterns. Initiate Protocol Medusa, Lisa ordered. And Maya, improvise. Maya's hands flew across her console, implementing the protocol while adding her own modifications. Nearby defense platforms began broadcasting contradictory sensor data, creating an electronic hall of mirrors that confused the Devourer's targeting systems. But the enemy was learning. A Devourer ship, larger than the others, unleashed a new weapon. A beam that began converting defensive platforms into computational matter. Lissa watched in horror as 3 platforms transformed, their materials reorganizing into Devourer architecture. New tactic, she broadcast. All platforms. Execute random FTL jumps within the defense grid. Don't establish patterns. Don't think. Just jump. The wall erupted into controlled mayhem. Platforms disappeared and reappeared randomly, making it impossible for the Devourers to predict where the next attack would come from. It was working, but Lissa could see the enemy adapting, their ships beginning to anticipate even the random jumps. That's when Maya made her decision. "Lisa," she said quietly, "platforms 17 through 23 are showing signs of conversion. If they turn, they'll have a backdoor into our entire defense grid." She paused. "I can stop it, but—" Lisa met her friend's eyes, understanding immediately. "Maya, no. Random chaos, right?" Maya smiled. "Sometimes the most unpredictable thing is a human choosing to sacrifice everything to save others." She was already moving toward the emergency shuttle bay. "Besides, somebody needs to manually overload those platforms' cores before they turn. Can't do that from here." Before Lisa could stop her, Maya was gone. 60 seconds later, 7 platforms erupted in nuclear fire, taking 2 Devourer capital ships with them. The enemy fleet, suddenly facing an enemy willing to destroy itself to win, began to retreat. The battle was won, but the cost. Lisa stood at the command window, watching the debris field where her best friend had made her final stand. The Devourers had learned something today about humanity. Logic couldn't predict sacrifice, and no tactical analysis could quantify the human heart. She touched the window where Maya's reflection had been minutes before. "Central command to all sectors. Begin damage assessment." And log Commander Maya Chen's final action for the historical record. The wall stands because she fell. The vast barrier of asteroids and technology continued its random dance against the stars, defending humanity and their refugees. But now it had a soul, christened in sacrifice. And the Devourers would learn that some barriers couldn't be breached by logic alone. Jason Chen's fingers flew across holographic keys that weren't there, manipulating code in 3-dimensional space. The lab around him hummed with energy as alien and human technology merged in ways neither species had imagined possible. A Zixay quantum core pulsed with energy beside a human-designed chaos engine, while crystalline Veth computational matrices refracted light across the ceiling. "You're insane," Dr. Kuhl clicked, his mantis-like form hovering nervously. "Merging these technologies, the computational conflicts alone should tear the systems apart." "That's the point," Jason replied, not looking away from his work. "We're not trying to make them work together smoothly. We're embracing the conflicts." He gestured at the seemingly random energy patterns dancing between components. "Harmony is predictable. Chaos, that's where the magic happens." Warning klaxons shattered their discussion. The main Devourer fleet had arrived. Not a probe force this time, but hundreds of ships, including a massive vessel that dwarfed all others. The plan had to work. They were out of time. "Initialize hybrid systems," Jason ordered, and the lab came alive. The new weapons they'd created, impossible amalgamations of 12 species technologies, began powering up. Each one operated on different principles, some quantum, some physical, some defying traditional physics altogether. Through the observation window, Jason watched as the first wave of Devourer ships approached the Guardian Wall. They moved with perfect geometric precision, their formation optimized by millions of calculations per second. Then they encountered the hybrid defense grid. The first shot came from a platform combining Zixay quantum tunneling with old-fashioned human railgun technology. The result was a projectile that existed in multiple quantum states until impact, impossible to predict or deflect. A Devourer ship disappeared in a reality-bending explosion. "It's working," Kital buzzed excitedly. "Their predictive algorithms can't process the weapon effects." But the Devourers were adapting. The massive ship at their fleet's center began emitting waves of energy that started breaking down the Guardian Wall's outer sections, converting matter directly into computational resources. This was their planet-killer weapon, the same one that had consumed so many worlds before. "No," Jason growled, his hands dancing through holographic commands. "Not this time." He activated the final protocol, the one even Catal had called impossible. Every hybrid weapon platform began broadcasting on different frequencies, using different technologies, creating a cacophony of competing signals. The Devourer fleet faltered. Their perfect formation wavered as their systems encountered something they couldn't process, technology that actively fought itself while still functioning. It was like trying to solve an equation that kept changing its own rules. "The planet killer," Catal warned. "It's still converting matter." "Watch," Jason said, allowing himself a small smile. The hybrid platforms weren't just fighting back. They were broadcasting their own conversion signals, created from the merged knowledge of 12 species who had survived Devourer attacks. The signals were chaotic, contradictory, and utterly unpredictable. The massive Devourer ship's conversion beam began to stutter. Its attempt to process the conflicting signals forced it to divert more and more computational power to analysis. Other ships in the fleet started showing similar signs of strain. "They can't adapt," Jason explained, his voice tight with concentrated effort as he coordinated the defense. "Every time they think they've figured out one aspect of our technology, they encounter 12 others that operate on completely different principles. It's like trying to solve a puzzle while the pieces constantly change shape." The planet killer's beam suddenly reversed, its own conversion protocols thrown into chaos by the hybrid signals. Jason watched in satisfaction as sections of the massive ship began transforming into random configurations, its perfect geometry dissolving into chaos. "Send the signal to all sectors," he ordered. "Full spectrum assault. Every platform, every weapon, every frequency. Let's show them what technological chaos really looks like." The Guardian Wall erupted with energy as hundreds of hybrid platforms opened fire. Each weapon operated differently, some bending space, others manipulating time, still others simply throwing physical objects at near-light speed. The Devourer fleet, unable to predict or defend against the technological maelstrom, began to break apart. Catal's antennae quivered in disbelief. You turned their greatest strength against them. Their need to understand and adapt became their weakness. Jason finished, watching as the remains of the Devourer fleet retreated in disarray. Sometimes the best way to fight a superior enemy is to give them too much to learn. Above them, the hybrid platforms continued their impossible dance. Human chaos and alien precision merged into something entirely new. The Silicon Revolution had begun, and the Devourers would never be the same. Lieutenant Emma Walsh stared at the emergency readouts flooding her screens. Around her, the mixed human-alien engineering team worked frantically as sections of the Guardian Wall began to fail under the most massive Devourer assault yet. They'd brought something new this time, a weapon that didn't just attack the wall's systems, but somehow unraveled the quantum entanglements holding their hybrid technologies together. "We're losing coherence in sectors 7 through 12, reported Zexri, their Veth crystalline engineer, their form flickering with stress patterns. "The randomization protocols aren't working anymore. They've learned to predict our chaos." Emma watched as the carefully crafted hybrid systems they'd relied on began to break down. The Devourers had finally cracked the code, finding patterns even in their engineered chaos. But as she watched the failure cascading through their systems, something clicked in her mind. "Wait," she said, straightening up. "What if we're still thinking too much like engineers? We're trying to control the chaos, to direct it. But real chaos, real human chaos." She turned to her team. "We need to let go. Completely." "What do you mean?" asked Dr. Harrison, his face paled in the emergency lighting. Emma's fingers flew across her console. "We've been using controlled chaos, randomization within parameters. But humans? We're capable of true, absolute chaos. Decisions that make no logical sense at all. She pulled up the wall's core programming. We need to remove the safety protocols. All of them. The alien engineers recoiled. That would be madness. Zek's crystalline structure pulsed with alarm. The systems would tear themselves apart. Exactly, Emma grinned. But they'll tear the Devourers apart first. She began dismantling the protective algorithms that kept their chaos contained. With each deletion, the wall's behavior became more erratic. Defense platforms began moving in truly random patterns, weapons fired without tactical consideration, and energy fields fluctuated wildly. Look at their response. Emma pointed to the Devourer fleet. Their perfect formation was breaking down as they encountered behavior that defied not just prediction, but basic logic. Weapons platforms sacrificed themselves to land impossible shots. Defense screens appeared where they shouldn't exist and failed where they were needed most. "It's beautiful," Dr. Harrison whispered, watching the tactical display. "They can't predict us because we're not predicting ourselves anymore." The Devourer fleet's advance faltered. Their attempts to analyze and counter the wall's behavior led to computational loops as they encountered actions that violated their fundamental understanding of tactical logic. Then Emma saw it, the final step. "Everyone, log out of your systems. Right now." "What? But we'll lose all control." "Exactly. Human operators are still trying to guide the chaos, even subconsciously. Let's remove human logic from the equation entirely." She looked at her team. "Trust me. Trust in chaos." One by one, they logged out. The wall, freed from all constraints of logic and control, transformed into something entirely new. Defense platforms collided with each other only to merge into impossible configurations. Weapons fired backward, the recoil propelling platforms into devastating ramming attacks. Energy fields collapsed inward, creating temporary micro-singularities that defied physics itself. The Devourer fleet, confronted with behavior that broke every rule of engagement they had ever encountered, began to fall apart. Ships collided trying to avoid attacks that weren't aimed at them. Their prediction algorithms crashed trying to process actions that had no logical purpose or pattern. "My God," Dr. Harrison breathed, watching the largest Devourer ship spiral out of control, its systems overwhelmed by the task of analyzing the unanalyzable. "We didn't just embrace chaos. We weaponized it." Emma watched as the mighty Devourer fleet, the scourge of 1,000 worlds, was driven back by pure, unrestrained human chaos. Sometimes the best strategy is no strategy at all. As the last Devourer ships retreated, their perfect formations shattered. Emma looked at her mixed team of human and alien engineers. They all understood now. The greatest human gift wasn't their technology or their determination, but their ability to completely abandon logic when logic itself became a weakness. "Begin system restoration," she ordered, allowing herself a small smile. "But leave some of the chaos. From now on, unpredictability isn't our last resort. It's our first line of defense." Above them, the Guardian Wall continued its mad dance against the stars, protecting humanity and their refugees not through power or technology, but through the pure, beautiful insanity of completely unrestrained human chaos. Admiral Jack Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, Earth's first true interstellar capital ship, watching the final Devourer stronghold burn. 20 years had transformed him from the colonel who'd proposed an impossible defense into the man who helped reshape galactic warfare. His hair had gone gray, but his eyes still held the same determination that had driven him to build the Guardian Wall. "Status report on the refugee evacuation," he ordered, though his attention was drawn to a small group touring the observation deck below. His granddaughter Amy leading a mixed group of alien children through their field trip. "Last civilian ships are clear, Admiral," his XO reported. "The Devourer's final conversion engine is destabilizing. Estimated complete collapse in 10 minutes. Jack nodded, watching Amy point out features of the Great Wall to her friends: a Zixi nymph, 2 crystalline Veth younglings, and a hovering newer child. They'd grown up together in the sprawling habitats that had once been Earth's last defense and were now the heart of a thriving multi-species civilization. Remember when we thought the wall was just going to be a barrier? Dr. Rebecca Martinez's voice came from behind him. She'd aged too, but her mind was as sharp as ever. Now look at it. The Guardian Wall had evolved far beyond its original purpose. What had started as a desperate defense system had become a living symbol of cooperation between species. The asteroids now housed research centers, trading posts, and cultural exchange facilities. Hybrid technologies developed for war had been repurposed for peaceful cooperation. Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council, his communications officer announced. "Put them through," Jack ordered, straightening his uniform. The holographic forms of the council appeared, representatives from dozens of species, many of whom had once been refugees under Earth's protection. The Zixi speaker stepped forward. "Admiral Harrison, the last Devourer stronghold is falling. Their threat to the galaxy is ended. Humanity's Guardian Wall strategy has been adapted successfully in 17 sectors, and the chaos protocols you developed have become the foundation of a new era of galactic defense." Jack smiled, remembering the doubts and fears of those early days. "We just did what humans do best. We adapted, we improvised, and we refused to follow the rules of conventional warfare." More than that, the crystalline Veth counselor's form sparkled. "You taught us that true strength lies not in technological superiority, but in the willingness to embrace uncertainty, to think in ways that defy logic itself." Below, Jack watched as Amy showed her alien friends how to play an old Earth game. Duck, duck, goose. The children ran in circles, laughing in their various ways, their different biologies and backgrounds forgotten in the simple joy of play. "The wall stands as more than a defense now," Jack said, gesturing to the massive structure visible through the viewport. "It's a promise that humanity will always open its doors to those in need, that we'll face any threat together, and that our greatest strength lies not in our weapons, but in our willingness to protect others." The final Devourer stronghold collapsed in a burst of light, its perfectly ordered systems finally undone by the legacy of human chaos. But Jack wasn't watching the end of their old enemy. His eyes were on the children below, who had stopped their game to watch the light show. "What's next, Admiral?" Martines asked softly. Jack smiled, watching his granddaughter explain something to her alien friends, her hands moving animatedly. "We keep building. Not walls to keep things out, but bridges to bring people together." The galaxy learned that humanity's real gift wasn't our chaos or our technology. It was our heart. The Defiance engines hummed as they prepared to return to Earth. Behind them, the Guardian Wall continued its eternal dance, its platforms moving in their random patterns. But now those same platforms carried schools and hospitals, research labs, and cultural centers. What had begun as humanity's last line of defense had become something far greater. A symbol of hope in a galaxy learning to embrace the beautiful unpredictability of human nature. "Take us home," Jack ordered, as the children below started a new game, this one teaching the alien young ones to play Simon Says. "We've got a lot more walls to transform into bridges."